Since I've been in kind of a Superman mood lately, I've checked out quite a few storylines, about Superman or big kind of DC Universe stories where Superman kind of plays a big picture, kind of like the one I'm reviewing today, which is Superman Birthright. Checked out Kingdom Come, Unchained, Last on Krypton, and I do intend to give All Star Superman another chance. I tried to read that book like I think 2 or 3 times, and I really don't like it. But I reread Kingdom Come recently, and I really, really liked that upon giving it another chance. So who knows? Maybe All Star Superman is going to work better for me with another read, but who knows? Anyway, Superman Birthright is a very fan loved Superman story that basically retells his origin for kind of like the modern age. And this is kind of a stark difference to stuff like Man of Steel and Superman Earth 1 in the way it executes the origin story itself. It's much more in line with kind of the older Superman from like the Christopher Reeve days. It's not exactly like that, but the spirit of that is kind of present throughout this. And I think that people who are kind of sick of Clark Kent feeling alone and sad and that kind of stuff, I think this book's going to work really well for them. And I don't love this as much as everybody else does. I'm going to say it right off the bat. There are some choices here that don't really work for me, and like they're probably going to work for some other people. People who are more fans of like more classical Superman, but there are a couple of things that just don't work for me here, but I'm going to get to those later. As I said, this is a retelling of Superman's origin. The first issue, which is easily the most boring one of them all, is, Jor-El and Lara saying how Krypton is doomed and blah, 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 giving us the backstory everybody fucking knows at this point, and shooting Kal-El off into space. And so things progress as they usually do. However, unlike most other Superman origin stories, we don't actually see his childhood here. The first issue is them sending Kal-El to Earth, as Krypton's blowing up, of course. And then the next issue is Clark as a 25-year-old, freelance reporter going through the world. And I think that the second issue is my favorite one of them all, because this is kind of a time period, like in Man of Steel, where Clark is not Superman yet. He is going around the world, reporting stuff, getting to the hard-hitting truth, and he inevitably gets into some trouble because he's going to places like Africa and Asia, places that have these, social issues and these militia groups and that kind of shit. And he inadvertently gets involved in that kind of stuff. And the second issue, which, like I said, is my favorite one of them all, actually deals with Africa, where there are these two tribes. And I don't remember their names, and they're really fucking hard to say. But there's the first tribe is the dominant one. They have all the riches, they have all the political power, they control the army, the police, basically the state. And the second tribe is kind of subservient to them. They, they live in, completely separate neighborhoods. They live in these kind of shanty towns. They work as, cleaners, janitors, that kind of stuff. And they're basically kind of the middle/lower class of the society. And there's this sort of political figure in the lesser tribe who is trying to improve the standing of his people in comparison to the big guns, because the main tribe is basically teaching the lesser tribe that their culture doesn't matter. They're not letting them learn their own history. They're forcing them to learn the big tribe's language, and they're basically committing kind of slow but steady cultural genocide. And then Clark gets involved in all this, and it's a really gripping story. It's like, for the subject matter it's dealing with, it's got a lot of heart. It's not too dark or gritty. It's got enough serious darkness kind of in it, but it still doesn't really come off as dark. Like, that's kind of one thing in this storyline that I feel not a lot of people get with Superman, is that, like, when they make Superman dark, they make him really dark, and it's pretty obvious. But here, there are a few moments where Superman, feels really down, where Superman, is in a kind of bad situation, but the tone still feels very hopeful and still feels very positive despite that. Now, I'm not necessarily sure if that's a good or bad thing. It works in Africa, but in some of the later issues when Clark is kind of facing like his first true challenge, I kind of feel like the tone isn't really adapting to the situation, and it's just like acting as its own separate entity that's not changing to accommodate the storyline, so that's maybe kind of an issue. But like I said, the second issue is my favorite. And then the rest of it is basically Superman in his first, few months operating, in Metropolis. It's him creating the Clark Kent persona, which has a lot of cool details to it. There's this kind of interesting bit with Pa Kent, who is this is one thing Wade does that's interesting, is that Pa Kent is still like this old farmer dude who like barely understands how electricity works. And then Ma Kent is this very tech-savvy woman, who knows how to use computers. She's very well-spoken. She and Clark typically exchange emails. She calls herself Area 52 during their little chats, which I think is a little clever. And what was interesting about that is that Clark, like in Man of Steel, John Byrne's Man of Steel, when he turned 18, the second he finished high school, he fucked off from Smallville, went to travel the world, became a freelance reporter, and did all that kind of stuff. And then when he comes back, and he says, look, Ma, Pa, I tried to operate like as just a dude, and everyone was kind of afraid of me because I'm just a dude who has a lot of power, and people were afraid of me, and I can't do that. And I don't want people to be afraid of me. I want to help people. I want to inspire hope. And then he and Pa Kent kind of butt heads because Pa Kent and Clark always had a really close relationship. And then when Clark comes back, Clark is saying like, "Oh man, I figured out a lot about my culture. I still don't know what my real name is or what my real home world's name is. But I managed to crack, the computer in the pod you guys sent me in. Like I saw all these great images of these really crazy looking awesome dudes with big S's on their chests, like fighting wars, building cities, and it's really cool." And then Pa Kent kind of feels like that Clark is rejecting his humanity. And that kind of hurts their relationship for a little bit. But of course, they reconcile at the end. Clark reassures him, like, "Yes, I'm an alien. I'm not from this planet, but you guys are still my family. I still love you, and I'm always gonna cherish the humanity you gave me." And I thought that was really sweet. It's a really cool scene. Him creating the Clark Kent persona is really clever because they help him out. One thing that is interesting in this book is that Clark doesn't learn about Krypton until the very end. This is pretty different from all the other versions where he learns his real name, the name of his planet, and all that kind of stuff, his backstory. He learns it immediately. He learns it usually before even becoming Superman. In this version, he doesn't even learn it until he's already been Superman for at least a little while. And I think that's interesting. And there is a lot of interesting uses of the Kryptonians with Lex Luthor. So they help him make the Clark Kent persona. And then the rest of the book is basically Clark, dealing with, the issues that he would be dealing with. He's got to prove himself as a good reporter because Clark in this book, God damn it. In this book, Superman is treated as Clark's true face. Like, the guy who's going to leap into action, who's going to really help people and that kind of stuff. And then when he's Clark Kent, he has to act as this kind of shy, quiet guy who doesn't really have that much of a backbone. And the problem with that is that when Clark writes, he writes like Superman. He writes like this big, bold, fearless guy he's going to get to the truth. He doesn't give a shit about the politics and all that stupid bullshit. He's going to get to the truth and nothing's going to stop him. And then when Perry sees him, he's like, yeah, how could a guy like you who's been staring at his own shoes for 30 minutes write something as gripping and as heartfelt and as great as that article about Africa? And I thought that was pretty interesting. Lex in this, this is kind of a spoiler, but Lex in this kind of figures out about Krypton and all that other stuff before Superman himself does. And then when he sees, all this weird design shit the Kryptonians have, he actually hires his own private military creates this copycat Kryptonian technology. At least it looks like it, and then he has them invade Metropolis, and so everybody becomes afraid of Superman. And even before then, he creates this kind of smear campaign for Superman, where he says, "Oh no, this guy's not human. This guy is an alien from another planet." And then you have people saying like, "Oh man, Superman passed by here, like he infected us with his alien plague, and we're all gonna die." And then it's like God hates aliens, and there is that kind of interesting stuff. And so most of the storyline between Superman and Lex is Lex trying to make people afraid of Superman. And then when Superman proves himself their champion, of course, at the end, he earns the people's trust, and he goes about his business, kicking ass and being Superman. There are a couple of I'm not really sure I like the idea that Clark learns about Krypton and his real name from Lex Luthor, of all people. That's weird, and I'm not sure I really like that, I guess. Because I don't really fully understand how Lex is able to tap into this nexus of Kryptonian technology. Maybe I need to reread that part a bit, but I wasn't really liking it. I wasn't really understanding it, and it's kind of a weird change. It works for this story, but still, it kind of feels like Superman would have told people that he is an alien, and he would have, told Lois Lane, something like that, at least to earn the people's trust, because Lex is the guy who blows the whistle on him being an alien, and that's good for smear campaign purposes, but I don't know. I kind of see Superman at least telling people some truth about his heritage, but then again, he doesn't really know much himself, so yeah. Lex. Okay, how do I say about Lex? What can I say? Lex is written well, but his personality doesn't really kind of click with me. He comes off as this really crazy mad scientist type dude, really overtly crazy. There's a lot of times where he's just smiling like the fucking Joker, and I'm not sure I like that. And then there's this whole thing with this kind of does the whole Silver Age thing, I think it was, where Lex Luthor actually moved to Smallville. He moved to Smallville, and because he was so rich, and because he was so smart, no one in Smallville could relate to him. He felt like an alien. He felt completely alone. No one could understand him. Like, whenever he tried to do something good, like, he actually proposed, this science program to help students learn better. He actually tried to get the football team in Smallville. He tried to do calculations for them to help them, get victory for sure. But no one listened to him. Everyone brushed him off. Everyone thought he was just spouting bullshit. No one really liked him. He was just like this. It was like when you put this. It's like when you put a fucking super genius in the middle of Hicksville, and of course the super genius, try as he might, he's not going to be able to get the Hicks to understand what the fuck he's up about. And the only person who really understood kind of that loneliness, kind of being different from everybody else, was Clark. And then he and Clark kind of have this friendship. And that was kind of interesting at first, but his whole motivation for why the friendship ends is really, really dumb. I really hate it. I think it's fucking stupid. It's so soap opera-y. It's like, oh man, it's like these guys, they're friends, they're awesome. And then Lex does his whole experiment thing, and then Clark starts gasping for air because it's fueled by kryptonite. And then Lex immediately just goes fucking apeshit. He's like, oh, you're just like everybody else. You hate me. You hate my genius. I will be the only thing from this town that's going to be worthwhile. Everyone will know Lex Luthor. And then he throws Clark out. And I'm like, oh, god damn it. I know this is comic books, and comic books, thrive on this soap opera bullshit. But I don't like it. I think it's a really cheap, really stupid way to end their friendship when it was kind of working for me, even. Usually I really don't like the whole idea that Lex and Clark knew each other before Smallville. I really like it when they're just two separate people who just happened to meet at one point in their lives and then just became mortal enemies. I think that's better. But this was actually kind of managing to sell me on their whole friendship in Smallville thing. But the motivation for why it ends is really dumb. It's a stupid excuse, and it was really really lazy writing. Overall, if you're someone who's kind of sick of the more darker Superman takes, like Man of Steel or the Earth One novels, I think you're really gonna like this. It's not amazing. Everybody overhypes this as like this amazing piece of fiction. It's not. If there's any part of this that's amazing, it's the second issue where Clark is dealing with the Africa stuff. That part is really what got to me. It was really well written. It was incredibly paced. It had the best writing, and it was just all around awesome. Like if I could just take one issue to show people why Superman is awesome, I would give him that issue, and and Superman's not even in it. That's like before he even puts on the costume. And I think that if I gave them that issue and they read it and understood what was happening, I think they would legitimately like Superman. So I think that's the really amazing part of it. The writing for Clark is really, really good. He's very optimistic. He's not overly Boy Scoutish. There's like no moment where he's like flying overhead and everyone's like, "Good morning, Superman." He's like, "Good morning, kids." And then he flashes a smile and says, "Remember to drink your orange juice." Which is something he does in Last Son of Krypton. Like, he actually does that, and it's really, really corny even there. So it makes Superman fun and interesting and pretty relatable without making him a Boy Scout or too powerful or any of that bullshit. So yeah, if you're looking for a really good retelling of Superman's origin, I think this is for you. If you're someone who's sick to death of them redoing the origin at all, this is probably not going to work for you very well. You're probably just going to say, this was good, but can we just get a good Superman story? Like, no origin, no death of Superman, just a Superman story. But yeah, the Mark Waid's writing. Mark Waid's a guy I usually don't like, but this and Kingdom Come were really good to me. Lionel Francis Yu is kind of a guy who's kind of gotten a bad reputation for being like this really for making big cleavaged women photos. But here, there's none of that. I think his action really works with Superman. I think the artist, the inker who they get to do the book, really gets the spirit of Superman, I feel. It's very colorful, very bright. And overall, I think that this is a pretty damn good retelling of the Superman origin. It's got a lot of interesting ideas in there. It's not like big or profound or something, but it's a fun retelling, and I think that if you're a fan of Superman, I think this is definitely something you should check out.